Chelsea, in our continued coverage of the Kroger-Albertsons potential merger, related lawsuits, loss of union support, on and on, today I want to talk about the claims that Kroger's chief executive has vowed to make that the company would cut grocery prices by $1 billion if the merger closed. I want to talk about why they certainly could do that and why we don't think they will.
Yeah, Sarah. So we actually saw last week that the CEO of Kroger and the CEO of Albertsons did testify in the trial that is ongoing in Portland, Oregon, that the FTC brought, right, to try to block this merger from happening right now
Yep.
so that they have a little bit more time to get everything together for their more in-house tribunal.
Yep.
And some really interesting stuff came out of it.
Yeah. I think the first important thing to touch on here is the way that Kroger is describing their competitors and who their direct competitors are. So I want to touch on this first. So during the trial, Kroger CEO Rodney McMullen warned that supermarkets were surrounded by non-traditional rivals selling food. And he's quoted as saying, "We would consider Walmart our number one competitor." The FTC attorney, Susan Musser, challenged McMullen about how much Kroger actually competes with dollar stores and club stores. She cited that company documents describe Albertsons as its number one or number two competitor in several of its major metropolitan markets. Now, I want to talk about why Kroger is claiming that Albertsons is not their number one competitor. Very easy, right? As probably many of you listening can guess. If they named them as their competitor during this FTC trial, then of course the judge will say, well, you can't merge with your number one competitor. That's removing or reducing competition within grocery retail, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you are naming Walmart or dollar stores or club stores as your biggest competitors, and you're framing that Albertsons is not one of those stores, then joining together would actually make the Kroger Albertsons stores more competitive, in fact, increasing competition in grocery against Walmart and other, larger non-traditional retailers, as he's calling it. And the merger would definitely create a situation where the Kroger Albertsons, merged stores would have access to lower cost goods. And this is a quote from the National Grocers Association. They say that the Kroger purchase of Albertsons, and this is a quote here, is engineered to enhance the largest conventional grocery chains' leverage over suppliers at the expense of smaller rivals. So with greater buying power, more consolidation, right? Kroger would have access to lower costs. It's just part of how business is currently done in the food industry. So therefore, they would have the ability to offer their products at lower prices. But we've got evidence, and that evidence has been shared in the trial from emails within each of these organizations that lead us to believe that even if given the opportunity or the ability to lower prices for customers, Kroger won't do it.
Yeah, this is like, you hear the beginning of your story, Sarah, about how they're really positioning this merger to be about purchasing power,
Yep.
right? And pricing power to be able to lower prices for consumers. But as we dig into these emails, as you said, that trust is going to be dashed. So let's start by talking about Andy Groff. Andy is Kroger's senior director for pricing.
Okay.
And he was also testifying in the trial last week. And he was shown emails from March that he sent to his bosses and questioned about them, where he acknowledged that the company had raised prices more than required to adjust for the higher costs they were seeing.
And can we just take a moment here and say, like, we've been seeing this in the news, right? It's been called corporate greed. When you have you're purchasing a product from a supplier, you can get your margin the retail store margin at a certain price, but you're choosing to sell your product at a higher price because you can.
Yeah. And I actually want to even call out the fact that, yes, it has been in the past called corporate greed, but I think that in today's climate, people are, politicians and people trying to fight against these sort of things are using stronger language, and they're calling it price gouging.
Yeah.
Very specifically. And a lot of people in the food industry, these big corporations, these big entities, are pushing back and saying it's not price gouging. We're, experiencing higher costs just like everyone else. But these emails prove that that's not the case.
Yeah.
Groff even wrote in the email, on milk and eggs, retail inflation has been significantly higher than cost inflation.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was going to bring up the word inflation and how inflation was used for such a long time, sort of post 2020, right, to explain away the increase in costs, right? And so it's interesting to see him use the terms retail inflation being higher than cost inflation, right? So, I mean, okay.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, as you said, for a company to call their own price hikes retail inflation.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't seem like it's even a thing, really. But there's more to these emails and more to this story. So next we're going to go to Illinois, where Kroger operates the Mariano's chain. And if you remember back when we did our first news segment on the merger itself, we went through and we listed all of the brands that are under Kroger's and under Albertsons. And so you're going to hear some callbacks to that here.
Yeah.
So Mariano's is a Kroger's chain. Matthew Marks, who is the president of Kroger's division overseeing Mariano's, has said that the company executives create a weekly report on egg prices. And they're comparing prices from a couple of different stores. Number one is Walmart, which that makes sense. Meijer, which is another big retailer, and Albertsons brand Jewel Osco.
Okay.
The FTC walked Marks through several of the weekly egg reports from 2022 and 2023. They showed evidence that in May of 22, for example, Walmart and Meijer both dropped their egg prices by 14 cents a dozen. But Mariano's, the Kroger brand, opted to keep its pricing the same to match the higher price at Jewel Osco.
Okay, let's call out the obvious things here. So they've got Walmart pricing, they've got Meijer's pricing. Kroger's is actively choosing to not match the company that they're claiming is now their top competitor.
Exactly.
And instead is matching the pricing for someone they are saying is not their competitor, which is Albertsons.
Yeah, and the FTC actually was able to point out that they did this again in April of 2023 when egg prices soared again. Mariano's opted to keep its pricing near Jewel Osco, even as Walmart, who, as you just stated, they're saying is their number one competitor, was lowering their own egg prices.
Right.
And this was shown through, again, emails within the company that Kroger executives wrote to each other, where they said, we look at Jewel, Walmart, and Meijer, but we focused against Jewel.
Right.
Please match Jewel. Like over and over. This is not just one email.
Right.
This is over time. They are constantly calling out that they are going to match Jewel Osco's prices.
And Jewel's are the highest amongst the three that they're looking at. And so they're basically matching the top price, which is another thing to sort of keep in mind here, is that if Meijer and Walmart are lowering their pricing, or even when they're raising it, they're not raising it quite as high as Jewel, Kroger is opting to match, or Mariano's in this case is opting to match Jewel. So it's matching the highest price, which is also important to remember when we're talking about will they or will they not actually lower their prices when given the opportunity.
Yeah. And ultimately, we can take them at what they're saying, that they will lower prices if the merger goes through. But I think we can see here through this evidence that it's probably not going to happen.
What I think is interesting is that if Albertsons and Kroger do end up merging, perhaps their price point would be Walmart. Like their price point comparison would still be Walmart, but there's no guarantee that they would match that they would lower to it, right? Because from the evidence we've seen so far here and the conversations that we've had, right, that through the merger and the divestiture, which we talk about in other videos, they're essentially getting rid of the lower priced chains in the Kroger-Albertsons chain, and they would maintain sort of the higher end markets. So it doesn't make sense that in those stores that they would lower their price to Walmart because they don't have the same customer. So to me, that's just another thing that, like, if we're critically thinking about this, it just doesn't make sense.
Or even make sense that they're trying to position themselves as becoming a competitor of Walmart.
Right.
Or that's the point of this.
Yeah. When they're clearly a very different store than Walmart in terms of what the general offering is. My local Ralph's, which is a Kroger, they've got a Starbucks in there. They've got a small flower shop in there. But beyond that, they are a grocery store. They don't offer anything else beyond grocery, pharmacy. You know what I mean? That's the bulk of it. So it's a strange comparison.
And interesting to note, right, when we just talked about the egg prices and how the Mariano's was comparing to, they listed Walmart, Meijer, and Jewel-Osco, and that they were really trying to price match Jewel-Osco. Meijer, you may not know, is actually a chain here. Like, we have a Meijer down the street, and it is very similar to a Walmart. Where it's not just grocery. Right. I remember the first time I would hear people talking about, I'm going to go to Meijer to pick up groceries. I totally thought it was a grocery store. I'd never been to one.
Right.
And then I saw a ad on like Instagram or something that was like, come buy your shoes at Meijer. And I was like, wait, what? And then I realized, it's the same model as like a Walmart.
Yeah. Really interesting. So that further confirms that, like, when you're looking at Walmart and Meijer, you're sort of looking at two true competitors, right? And then you're also looking at Jewel-Osco and going, okay, that's our person. We're just kind of being aware, you know what I mean? And then we're aligning ourselves with our closest competitor. And I think, as I stated in the beginning, if this merger was to go through, the Kroger-Albertsons blended company would certainly have, even after divesting, 600 stores, whatever it is, have purchasing power that would allow them to lower their prices. Quite frankly, they've got the margins in store to lower the prices without the merger, as we're seeing from these emails. But these emails also provide evidence that they're unlikely to match a Walmart and a Meijer in the markets where they are also competing on some level, because you can buy groceries from both, but you definitely have a different customer base shopping there. So I just don't think that it's going to happen. And I find it fascinating that throughout this process, the executives and the high-level employees just continue to say different things in trial than what they've been saying in text messages and emails. And, I hope that the court sees through this. I hope that the pause is granted and that the FTC gets to continue to do their work, their much needed work here. The trial in Portland goes into what is now its final week on Monday, September 16th. We're going to bring you guys updates as we get them in the news and just keep you posted on how things are advancing there. If you want to be up to date and know when our newest news episodes and podcasts, for that matter, are released, Chelsea, how can they stay in touch?
Yeah, they should, number one, hit the subscribe button under this video and make sure that you have notifications turned on so that you get updates every time we post a new video. The other thing that you can do if you want more updates like this from the Good Food CFO, you can go to our website. The link is at the top of our page, or you can just go to thegoodfoodcfo.com and sign up for our newsletter. When you sign up, you're going to get weekly emails to your inbox with updates like news stories and a whole lot more.
And one last reminder, the Good Food CFO returns for the start of season 12 on Monday, September 30th.
We'll see you then.